In the winter of 1944, on the outskirts of a ruined European village, a tank crew vanished in a matter of seconds. Not because of enemy fire, not because of a mechanical failure, but because the ground beneath them collapsed, burying their 32-ton vehicle under tons of earth, mud, and stone. At first, no one believed the report. Tank crews feared fire, explosions, and ambushes, but being buried alive inside a steel coffin was a nightmare few could imagine. Yet this is exactly what happened to Sergeant Alan Reeves and his four-man crew. Over the next several hours, inside complete darkness, with almost no air left to breathe, the men fought not an enemy, but the crushing weight of the earth itself. This is their story. The day began quietly. Reeves' crew rolled forward at a slow pace through a deserted village road lined with collapsed walls and frozen rubble. Inside the tank, the men worked in practiced rhythm, the driver scanning the ground, the gunner adjusting the elevation wheel, the loader checking ammunition stacks, the radio operator tracking their lead unit's signal. It was meant to be a routine movement, the kind tank crews made dozens of times. But beneath the thin layer of snow, the ground hid a dangerous secret: the remains of an old, forgotten cellar, weakened by bombardments. The tank's weight alone was enough to endanger it. At precisely 11:42 a.m., the left track rolled over a patch of snow that looked no different from the rest. Then the earth gave way. The tank tilted sharply. Metal screamed as the left side dropped into emptiness. The gunner was thrown sideways. A crate of shells slid across the floor. The radio operator struck his head on the set behind him, and then the entire structure beneath the vehicle collapsed, pulling the tank downward as if the ground had swallowed it whole. Within seconds, the 32-ton machine plunged through the hidden cellar roof and crashed into the darkness below. The sound of falling debris thundered through the confined interior. When the dust settled, the crew found themselves in complete blackness. The tank's exterior hatches were pinned shut by earth and broken stone. The periscope lenses were filled with dirt. The air felt thick, heavy, and unmoving. Reeves called out to each of his men. One by one, faint voices replied. They were bruised, shaken, but alive. The driver attempted to push open his hatch. It didn't budge. The loader tried his, also jammed. The weight above them was enormous, and the oxygen inside the sealed hull slowly thinning. For the first time, true fear began to settle in. Reeves ordered all lamps off to conserve air. They used only one small inspection light, its faint glow barely illuminating their faces. The air pressure had changed. The men could feel it in their ears. The radio operator attempted to send a distress signal, but soil had crushed the external antenna, leaving them completely isolated. Reeves tried to calculate the collapse. The cellar must have been old, wide, and deep. The tank was at least 2 meters below the surface. Debris from the roof and the walls had sealed them in. They weren't just stuck. They were entombed. As minutes turned into an hour, the loader began to panic. He kicked at the floor plates, gasping for air that wasn't there. Reeves forced him to sit, reminding the crew that panic would only burn oxygen faster. But the air already smelled metallic and stale. Dust floated visibly through the thin beam of the inspection light. Inside the sealed steel box, their breath condensed on the cold walls. The gunner wrapped his coat around his mouth to slow his breathing. The driver leaned forward, head between his arms, fighting to stay calm. Each man knew what suffocation felt like, and none wanted to meet that end deep underground. Reeves ordered the crew to try the turret hatch. It was their thickest, strongest exit. Working together, they pushed upward with everything they had. The hatch moved less than a centimeter. Soil fell inward through the small gap. The gunner immediately shoved it closed again. Opening it would only bury them faster. The driver then attempted to activate the starter, thinking they might shift the tank's angle and free a hatch. When the engine roared, soil shook loose from above, and the entire chamber groaned ominously. The driver shut the engine off immediately. One wrong vibration could collapse the remaining ceiling. The crew's breathing grew more labored. Moisture ran down the interior walls. The inspection light flickered as the batteries weakened. The radio operator began drifting in and out of consciousness. Reeves shook him, kept him awake, and forced him to sip from a canteen. Inside the tank, oxygen became the enemy's most brutal weapon. The men tore fabric from their jackets and placed them over their faces, hoping to filter dust and delay suffocation. But it made little difference. Every breath felt heavier. After nearly 2 hours underground, a faint rumbling echoed above them, the first sign of hope. Reeves froze. The men held their breath, listening. Distant voices, shovels hitting stone, someone calling out. The collapse had been noticed. A rescue team was near. The men shouted back, but their voices were muffled by tons of earth. Still, they kept shouting until their throats burned. They were alive, and someone had heard. Above ground, soldiers dug frantically. The earth was unstable. Every shovel of dirt threatened a new collapse. The rescuers had to work slowly, removing rubble one piece at a time. Inside the tank, the noise above grew louder. Light sifted through tiny cracks. Dust rained down with every impact. But hope returned. The crew smiled weakly in the dim inspection light. The driver whispered that he just wanted to see the sky again. Reeves promised him he would. As oxygen reached its lowest point, the men struggled to stay conscious. Their breaths were shallow. The inspection lamp finally died, plunging them back into darkness. Then, metal scraped above them. Someone was right on top of the turret hatch. A heavy tool hammered against the steel. The hatch moved. Air rushed inside, cold, fresh, and life-giving. The crew gasped desperately as rescuers pried the hatch open. For the first time in hours, the men saw daylight, thin and gray, but beautiful. Rescuers formed a human chain to pull the exhausted men up through the narrow opening. The gunner had to be lifted out with a rope. The loader was barely conscious. The radio operator wept as he reached the surface. The driver paused, kneeling in the cold air, staring at the partially buried silhouette of the tank that had nearly become their grave. Reeves climbed out last. When his head broke the surface, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply, as if the entire world was finally returning to him. The event became a quiet story passed among armored units. Almost no official records mentioned it. The collapse was considered an accident of terrain, but the story lived on, through those who heard it firsthand. A reminder that war held dangers beyond bullets and explosions. Dangers hidden beneath the earth, waiting silently. Years later, Reeves would tell younger crews the same message. A tank protects you from the outside world, but when that world collapses, it becomes your only hope. Their survival was a rare miracle in a war filled with tragedies, a testament to endurance, leadership, and the will to keep breathing in the darkest of places.